What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to The World According to Briggs and a video about Alaska and some of the reasons you might not want to move there. Back in 2017, we did a top 10 reasons not to move to Alaska. In those 5 years, Alaska's gone from a state that was gaining a small number of people to losing people. In the first 7 years of the census, Alaska was still gaining population. The last 3 saw a steady stream of people leaving. Since the 1930s, Alaska has increased its population in double-digit percentages, from as high as 77% in the 1950 census to 2010 census, where they gained 13%, so they had a nice range there. In the 2020 census, Alaska gained 3. Like I said, they gained a bunch, well, not a bunch, they gained a good amount in the first 7 years, then they started losing. It is predicted by the 2030 census, Alaska will lose 15% of their population. So why are people leaving the last frontier? I think the reasons on this list are what's making a lot of Alaskans skip town. Little disclaimer before we get going. Alaska is a great state and it has a lot of reasons to live there. It's just not for everyone. Every state has its pros and its cons. This list is just about things you should know before you start thinking it's a good idea to move to Alaska. I'm not telling people not to move to Alaska, even though that's the title. It just is a better title than things you should consider before you commit to moving to Alaska. That doesn't ring as good as 10 reasons not to move to Alaska. Get it? Got it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10. The ratio of men to women. If you're a man moving to Alaska and think you're going to find a woman up there, there's a lot of competition. Alaska has the absolute worst male to female ratio in all of the United States. Give you an idea how bad it is. So the state of Alabama has the best ratio if you're a man looking for a woman. I guess it's not that good if you're a woman looking for a man. But Alabama has 94 men for every 100 women. So if you're a dude looking to better your Tinder chances, move to Alabama. Don't move to Alaska. Alaska has 110 men for every 100 women. Horrible odds for men, great odds for women. I used to work with a woman from Alaska, and she said, if you're looking for a man, the odds are good. It's just too bad that most of the time, the goods are pretty odd. I asked her to explain that when she said, Alaskan dudes are kind of weird a lot of times, so you gotta pick and choose carefully. Number 9, the weather. For 3, maybe 4 months around the summer, you get some decent weather in Alaska. But it's a big state with a lot of land and a lot of different elevations. So you could be living someplace in some mountain area and it's going to seem like winter all year long, but they do have some summers that are pleasant. The rest of the year you get wet, cold, and nasty, wet, really cold and nasty, and wet, freezing, and deadly. We have a lot of states that get some brutal winters. Alaska just happens to be a little extra brutal sometimes. On average, 19 people freeze to death every single year in Alaska. So if you're moving up there, make sure you do a little research on how to survive the winters up there, like having different things in your car in case you break down in the middle of a snowstorm, crap like that. Number 8, violent crime. Alaska's top of the class when it comes to violent crime rate. Well, they're beat by the District of Columbia, but it's not a state. So as far as the states go, Alaska is number 1. For comparison, let me give you some numbers here. The absolute safest state in the Union is Maine. Their violent crime rate is 108 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents. So that's really low, and it's good. The national average of the United States is 398 for every 100,000 residents. Alaska has a violent crime rate of 847.5 for every 100,000 residents. And what's incredible, that's better than they've done in recent years. In 2019, it was 891 for every 100,000 residents, and 2020, it was 865 for every 100,000 residents. Number 7, the unauthorized use of another human's body. Let me explain. This is an act that normally happens to women, but sometimes happens to men in prison in situations like that. I'm not trying to be funny or make light of a very serious situation. It's just if I use that word, I get demonetized, and I don't like to get demonetized. I would skip it, but it's too important and too shocking to not let you know about it in case you are thinking about moving to Alaska. Just to give you an idea, the state with the absolute lowest rate for this is New Jersey with 14 reported for every 100,000 residents. Arkansas has the second highest rate at 72 per every 100,000 residents. Alaska is 154.8 for every 100,000 residents. When we were on a cruise recently, I was talking to one of the local girls. I mentioned that we're originally from Los Angeles, and she said she's actually planning on going to the Los Angeles Police Academy once she gets out of Alaska. That's like her dream. I asked her, why you want to leave Alaska? Why don't you stay here? And she kind of explained that. What she said was sad. I quote, "When you're a young girl growing up, you always think, God, I hope that never happens to me." In Alaska, it's a little bit different. You almost have the attitude of, I wonder when it's going to happen to me. That sucks. Number 6. You're gonna need a car. Alaska is considered the least walkable state. The big city they do have, Anchorage, and they have some other smaller ones, Soldotna, things like that. They really don't have train systems or a big bus line or anything like that. They might have little ones, but nothing major like great public transit systems like they have in New York, Portland, Oregon, a bunch of other places. The cities they do have are also very spread out, and there's a lot of land between you and the next town over. So you need a car. It's definitely not a walkable place. Some cases in Alaska, you can't even get to some of the towns with a car. You need a boat or a plane. If you look at the area down there in the Inside Passage, they call it, look at places like Haines, Alaska, Sitka, Ketchikan. You need a boat to get there or a plane. Those are your only options. This is one of those things that for some people, that sounds terrific. They'd love it if that's how far off the beaten path they lived. That'd be great for a lot of people. I'm sort of one of them. I need to be a little bit close to a town, but I'd like to at least be able to drive there. I don't know how much I'd like living, 4 hours on a boat outside of town. Number 5, gun friendly. This is one of those things that some people are going to think it's great. Some people just don't like firearms, and that's it. That's just how it is. I'm not judging either one. You do you, whatever. But there are some people out there on this planet that really get sketched out by anyone owning guns in their neighborhood. And if that's the case, there's no place in Alaska for you to live because people in your neighborhood will own firearms. In some cases, if you live out in the sticks, like in some of those towns I talked about where you got to take a boat to get to, it's kind of a necessity. But even in the smaller towns and in the cities, people own firearms. And if that's not your thing, Alaska's not your state. Number 4, airline tickets are expensive. Airline tickets are very expensive in Alaska in normal times. Right now, because of the pandemic and not many people fly in, flights are about half the price they used to be. So kind of put this one in the back of your head for the future. I mean, once we're out of this whole pandemic and life sort of gets back to normal, I guarantee flights are going to go up again. But if you're flying anywhere in the country other than maybe Seattle to go to Alaska, it's going to be an all-day event, like 7 to 10 hours. And you'll be lucky if you find a flight for under $500. Number 3, the wildlife. Well, I've talked about this before. The wildlife in Alaska is a little crazy. I mean, there's obviously bears, and that's a bigger problem than most people would think. They're not killing people every single week, but they do pop up out of nowhere. When we were up in the Kenai Peninsula fishing, everyone's got these horn things on them and bear spray, firearms, and you got to make a lot of noise when you're walking down the path to go fishing, just so you don't startle one and he whips around and, chews your face off. Got to worry about moose, running into moose in your car. That's a problem. But I think the biggest problem that I hated while I was there at the Kenai Peninsula was the mosquitoes. During the summer, the mosquitoes were horrible. I have heard Michigan has the worst mosquito problems of any state. I've been to Michigan, not the dead of summer, but it didn't seem like that much of a problem. I wore shorts while fishing. After 2 or 3 days, it looked like my legs had smallpox. Number 2, the cost of living. Everything in Alaska is expensive. I mean, besides salmon and crab, probably. Like Hawaii, we just talked about the other day, everything has to be shipped to Alaska from the mainland, and that gets expensive. Some companies won't even ship to Alaska, like IKEA, Wayfair, a couple other places. Amazon still ships there. Amazon will ship to the moon if you need it there bad enough. Got to be a Prime member, though. But yeah, this leads to everything from groceries to clothing to anything you can think of that you got to buy in a retail or grocery situation. It's going to be more expensive. Again, when we were in the Kenai Peninsula, I went in to get some things. I was surprised. I probably bought, I'm just guessing, what normally would have been like $60 worth of stuff down here in Portland, Oregon. It's like I thought it was going to be $60 there. Okay, this is about $60 worth of stuff without watching. It was like $110. I brought this up before and people go, well, they pay you to live in Alaska and that kind of makes it even. It doesn't even make it close to even. If you're living off the grid someplace and you go into town for supplies like once a year, maybe that $800 to $1,500 they give you every single year, maybe that helps, but that doesn't really cover how bad you're getting hosed all year long. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. Please go over and subscribe, give some videos big thumbs up, leave some comments, let me know what you think. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, the Voluntary Dirt Nap. Like that other thing we talked about earlier, the unauthorized use of another human's body, this is another subject that I can't say or I'll get demonetized, but basically it involves pushing your own off button because of things like depression. Depression isn't the worst in Alaska, but it's up there. Lack of vitamin D from less sun, things like that, loneliness, isolation, that leads people to the final destination earlier than they should have gone. Alaska comes in second place when it comes to this one. The only one that beats them is Wyoming. 29 people for every 100,000 push their own off button in Wyoming. In Alaska, it's 28.5. But that is a serious problem in Alaska. Up until 2017, Alaska was leading the pack for quite some time. So I guess slipping down to number 2 is, progress. All right, everyone, that's today's list. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, be nice to each other.